What if some of the biggest changes in your life begin with something you cannot see? Your thoughts, your beliefs, your habits, and the way you respond to the world around you. Have you ever wondered why two people can face a similar situation, yet react in completely different ways? Why does one person remain confident while another immediately expects failure? Why do certain fears keep returning, even when you know they are not helping you? And perhaps the biggest question: can changing the way you think actually change the way you live? Welcome to this complete educational summary of The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. In this journey, we are going to explore the relationship between conscious thoughts, beliefs, habits, emotions, and behavior. But there is something important to understand from the beginning. We will not treat every claim in the original book as scientifically proven fact. Instead, we will carefully focus on the practical ideas that can help us understand self-awareness, positive thinking, confidence, emotional control, goal setting, and personal development. Throughout this summary, we will explore questions that may completely change the way you look at your own thoughts. Can repeated thinking influence your habits? Can your beliefs affect the decisions you make? Why do negative thought patterns become so difficult to break? And how can you replace unhelpful patterns with healthier ones? We will also separate practical psychological concepts from claims that should be treated with caution. So don't just listen for information. Listen for the questions. Because one of those questions may make you look at your own mind differently. And by the end, you may understand why changing your behavior often begins with changing the way you think. Let's begin. Section 1. Before we try to change our habits, goals, or circumstances, there is one place worth examining first. Our own mind. Every day, we think thousands of thoughts. Some are intentional. Others appear automatically because of habits, memories, expectations, and previous experiences. You may wake up expecting a difficult day before anything has even happened. You may avoid an opportunity because you already believe you will fail. You may become nervous in a situation because your mind has learned to associate it with danger or embarrassment. These reactions can feel automatic. But automatic does not always mean permanent. One of the central ideas explored in The Power of Your Subconscious Mind is that repeated thoughts and beliefs can influence the way we respond to life. That idea needs to be understood carefully. The book presents a strong view of the subconscious mind, including claims that go beyond what modern science can establish. We should not treat every such claim as proven fact. However, there is a practical lesson worth exploring. The patterns you repeatedly think about can influence your attention, emotions, decisions, and behavior. Consider someone who constantly tells themselves, "I am not capable." Over time, that belief may affect how they approach challenges. They may avoid difficult tasks. They may give up quickly. They may interpret ordinary mistakes as proof that they are incapable. Eventually, their behavior can appear to confirm the belief they started with. Now imagine someone who approaches the same challenge differently. Instead of saying, "I cannot do this," they think, "I do not know how to do this yet, but I can learn." That statement does not magically guarantee success. But it can create a different response. The person may be more willing to practice. They may seek information. They may ask questions. They may continue after making mistakes. And those behaviors can produce better opportunities for improvement. This is why the way we talk to ourselves matters. Our internal dialogue can influence what we notice, how we interpret situations, and what actions we are willing to take. But positive thinking should not be confused with pretending that problems do not exist. If you have a real problem, simply repeating a positive sentence will not automatically solve it. A financial problem still requires responsible financial decisions. A difficult relationship still requires communication and appropriate boundaries. A lack of knowledge still requires learning. A personal goal still requires action. Healthy thinking works best when it supports responsible behavior. This brings us to another important idea. Attention. What you repeatedly focus on can affect what you notice. Imagine walking through a crowded street while thinking about a particular type of car. Suddenly, you may begin noticing that type of car everywhere. The cars were already there. Your attention simply became more sensitive to them. A similar process can happen with opportunities and problems. If you constantly expect failure, you may notice evidence that supports your fear while overlooking possibilities. If you deliberately look for useful solutions, you may become more aware of options you previously ignored. This does not mean that thoughts control reality. It means that attention influences what information stands out to you. And what stands out can influence your decisions. Another important part of this process is repetition. A single thought usually does not create a permanent change. But repeated patterns can become familiar. When a thought is repeated again and again, it can become easier to think automatically. This is one reason habits are difficult to change. The brain becomes efficient at repeating familiar patterns. If someone constantly reacts to stress with anger, that reaction may become familiar. If someone responds to challenges by avoiding them, avoidance can become a default response. But new patterns can also be practiced. Instead of immediately reacting, you can pause. Instead of assuming the worst, you can examine the facts. Instead of saying, "I always fail," you can ask, "What exactly went wrong this time, and what can I learn from it?" This creates space between a thought and an action. That space is important. Because a thought is not automatically a command. You can notice a thought without accepting it as truth. You can experience fear without allowing fear to make every decision. You can recognize self-doubt without treating it as a prediction of your future. This is where self-awareness becomes powerful. The more clearly you recognize your mental patterns, the easier it becomes to question them. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it based on evidence? Is it always true? Is there another way to interpret this situation? What action would be more helpful? These questions can transform an automatic reaction into a deliberate decision. Another important idea is the connection between beliefs and behavior. Suppose someone believes that learning a new skill is impossible for them. They may not practice consistently. Because they do not practice, they make little progress. Their lack of progress then strengthens the original belief. This creates a cycle. Belief influences behavior. Behavior produces results. Results appear to confirm the belief. Breaking that cycle may require changing the behavior as well as questioning the belief. Instead of waiting to feel completely confident, the person can begin with a small action. Practice for a short period. Learn one concept. Complete one task. Review the result. Then improve. Confidence can grow from evidence created by action. This is a much more practical approach than simply hoping that positive thoughts will produce results. Another important lesson is that our minds are influenced by what we repeatedly consume. The information we read. The conversations we have. The people we spend time around. The content we watch. The messages we repeatedly hear. All of these can influence what becomes familiar in our thinking. This does not mean that we need to avoid every negative idea. Reality includes problems, criticism, failure, and uncertainty. The goal is balance. Consume information that helps you think clearly. Question exaggerated claims. Learn from criticism without allowing every criticism to define you. And avoid building your entire worldview around fear or negativity. Ultimately, the practical message of this section is simple. Pay attention to your thoughts. Question your automatic beliefs. Practice healthier patterns. And connect your thinking with responsible action. Your mind is not a magical machine that can guarantee whatever you imagine. But your thoughts can influence attention, emotions, habits, and decisions. And those decisions can influence the direction of your life. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I cannot do this," pause. Ask a better question. What is one thing I can do to move forward? That small change in thinking may lead to a different action. And a different action, repeated consistently, can begin creating a different pattern. Section 2. If your thoughts can influence your attention and behavior, then an important question follows. How do repeated thoughts become patterns? The answer begins with repetition. A thought that appears once may disappear quickly. But when the same idea is repeated again and again, it can become familiar. And familiar patterns often require less conscious effort. Think about something as simple as learning a new routine. At first, you have to think about every step. After repeating it many times, the process becomes easier. The same principle can apply to mental habits. A person who constantly expects criticism may become highly sensitive to negative reactions. A person who repeatedly doubts their abilities may hesitate before taking opportunities. A person who regularly focuses on possible solutions may become quicker at searching for practical answers. This does not mean the mind has unlimited power over reality. It means repeated patterns can influence how we interpret situations and how we respond to them. That distinction is important. The original book often describes the subconscious mind in very powerful terms. Some of those claims are philosophical or metaphysical rather than established scientific facts. So we should approach them thoughtfully. Instead of believing that simply thinking about something guarantees that it will happen, we can focus on a more practical lesson. What you repeatedly think about can influence what you notice, what you expect, and what actions you take. And your actions matter. Imagine two students preparing for an important exam. The first student repeatedly thinks, "I am going to fail. There is no point trying." That belief may reduce motivation. The student may procrastinate, avoid difficult topics, and stop practicing when the material becomes challenging. The second student thinks, "This is difficult, but I can improve if I practice consistently." That belief does not guarantee a good result. But it can encourage different behavior. The student may study more regularly, ask for help, review mistakes, and continue practicing. The difference begins with thinking, but the result is influenced by action. This is why positive thinking should always be connected with reality. You cannot simply imagine a goal and expect the world to deliver it. A goal requires planning. A skill requires practice. A problem requires appropriate action. And a difficult situation may require patience and support. Thoughts can influence the way we approach these things, but they do not replace the work. Another important concept is expectation. What you expect can influence what you pay attention to. Suppose you believe that people always disappoint you. When someone makes a small mistake, you may immediately notice it. But when someone behaves kindly, you may barely register it. Your expectation has created a filter. The same thing can happen with opportunities. If you believe that there are no opportunities available, you may stop looking. If you believe that improvement is possible, you may become more willing to search, learn, and experiment. Again, this does not mean opportunities magically appear because you think positively. It means your expectations can influence your behavior toward the opportunities that already exist. This is why changing a mental pattern can be useful. But changing a pattern requires awareness. Start by noticing your repeated thoughts. What do you tell yourself when something goes wrong? Do you immediately think, "I always fail"? Do you assume that other people are judging you? Do you expect the worst before you have enough information? Do you tell yourself that learning something new is impossible? These statements may feel like facts. But sometimes they are interpretations. And interpretations can be examined. A useful technique is to separate facts from assumptions. Suppose someone does not respond to your message. The fact is simple. They have not responded yet. Your mind may create a story. They are angry with me. They do not respect me. They never want to talk to me again. Those conclusions may or may not be true. Without evidence, they remain assumptions. Recognizing this difference can reduce unnecessary emotional reactions. Instead of reacting to the story in your mind, you can wait for more information. This simple habit can improve decision-making. Another important principle is emotional control. Emotions are real experiences, but they do not always provide complete information. Fear can signal that something deserves attention. Anger can indicate that you feel hurt or treated unfairly. Sadness can tell you that something matters to you. But an emotion does not automatically tell you what action is correct. This is why creating a pause can be powerful. When you feel a strong emotion, pause before making an important decision. Take a moment. Identify what you are feeling. Ask what caused it. Look at the facts. Then decide what response is appropriate. This is not about suppressing emotions. It is about preventing emotions from controlling every decision. Another important idea is self-image. The way you see yourself can influence the goals you attempt. If you see yourself as someone who cannot learn, you may avoid learning. If you see yourself as someone who can improve through effort, you may be more willing to practice. But self-image should remain realistic. You do not need to convince yourself that you are perfect. A healthier approach is to recognize both strengths and weaknesses. You can say, I have things I am good at, and I have things I still need to learn. That creates room for growth. Another useful habit is replacing absolute language. Words like always, never, and impossible can make problems appear larger than they really are. Instead of saying, I always make mistakes. Try, I made a mistake, and I can learn from it. Instead of, I will never succeed. Try, I have not succeeded yet, and I need to understand what I can improve. This is not empty optimism. It is more accurate thinking. Accuracy matters because better decisions usually require a clearer understanding of reality. Another important lesson is repetition through constructive practice. If you want to build a new habit, do not rely only on motivation. Create a practical routine. Choose a small action. Repeat it consistently. Track your progress. Adjust when necessary. Over time, the new behavior can become more familiar. This applies to studying, exercising safely, organizing your work, improving communication, managing money, or developing a useful skill. The mind does not need magical instructions. It needs repeated experiences and deliberate practice. This brings us to one of the most practical ideas in this entire discussion. Your thoughts are important, but your choices are what turn thoughts into behavior. You can think about becoming more disciplined. But discipline becomes real when you act. You can think about becoming more confident. But confidence can grow when you practice, learn, and face manageable challenges. You can think about improving your future. But improvement requires consistent decisions. So rather than asking only, how can I think more positively? Ask a better question. What thoughts will help me take responsible action? That question connects mindset with reality. And once you learn to recognize your thoughts, question your assumptions, and connect your thinking with practical behavior, you become better prepared to change the patterns that have been holding you back. Section 3. What happens when a thought is repeated so many times that it begins to feel like a fact? This is where beliefs become important. A belief is more than a passing thought. It is an idea that we have accepted strongly enough to influence the way we see ourselves, other people, and the world around us. Some beliefs help us grow. Others can quietly limit us. For example, imagine someone who believes, I am not good at learning. That belief may affect their behavior before they even begin. They may avoid difficult subjects. They may give up quickly. They may compare themselves with others. And when they struggle, they may use the struggle as proof that the original belief was correct. This creates a cycle. The belief influences behavior. The behavior produces an outcome. The outcome appears to confirm the belief. Breaking that cycle begins with questioning the belief itself. Ask: is this actually a fact? Where did I learn to think this way? Is there evidence that proves it is always true? What would happen if I approached this differently? These questions create space for a new possibility. But changing a belief does not mean replacing it with an unrealistic statement. If you are struggling with something, saying, "I am already perfect at this," may not be useful. A more realistic thought could be, "I am not good at this yet, but I can improve with practice." That statement is both encouraging and grounded in reality. This distinction is important because useful thinking should help us see reality more clearly, not escape from it. The original book places significant emphasis on the power of belief and suggestion. Some of its explanations are presented in spiritual or metaphysical terms that are not established scientific facts. For this summary, we will focus on the practical psychological lesson. Repeated ideas can influence attention, expectations, emotions, and behavior. And because behavior matters, the beliefs behind that behavior deserve attention. Consider confidence. Many people think confidence means believing that you will always succeed. It does not. Healthy confidence can mean believing that you can handle challenges, learn from mistakes, ask for help, and continue improving. A confident person can still feel nervous. They can still make mistakes. They can still experience uncertainty. The difference is that they do not automatically interpret those feelings as proof that they are incapable. This is especially important when facing something unfamiliar. The first attempt at a new skill may be uncomfortable. The first presentation may feel difficult. The first serious project may contain mistakes. The first attempt at changing a habit may fail. None of these experiences automatically determines your future. They provide information. You can examine what happened and make the next attempt better. This is why the way you interpret failure matters. One person sees failure as an identity. I failed, therefore I am a failure. Another person sees it as information. That approach did not work. What can I change? The second interpretation creates room for learning. This does not mean every failure should simply be ignored. Sometimes failure reveals that a goal needs to change. Sometimes it shows that more preparation is required. Sometimes it reveals that a particular approach was unrealistic. The point is to learn rather than immediately turn one result into a permanent judgment about yourself. Another important area is fear. Fear can be useful because it can alert us to genuine danger. But fear can also appear when we are facing uncertainty, embarrassment, or the possibility of failure. If every uncomfortable situation is treated as a threat, we may avoid opportunities to learn and grow. A better approach is to ask, what exactly am I afraid of? What evidence supports this fear? What part of the situation can I control? What is the smallest responsible step I can take? These questions turn a vague fear into something more specific. Once the problem becomes specific, it may become easier to respond to. Another important principle is attention. Your mind receives a huge amount of information every day. You cannot consciously focus on everything. So your attention constantly selects what seems important. If you repeatedly focus on problems, you may become very sensitive to problems. If you deliberately search for solutions, you may become better at noticing possible solutions. Again, this does not mean ignoring reality. If there is a real problem, you should recognize it. But recognizing a problem and becoming consumed by it are not the same thing. A useful mindset is, here is the problem. Now what can I responsibly do about it? That question shifts attention from helplessness toward action. Another powerful concept is the influence of language. The words you repeatedly use can shape how you describe your experience. Imagine saying, "My life is ruined." That statement creates a very different emotional reaction from, "I am facing a serious problem, and I need to work out my next step." The second statement does not deny the difficulty. It simply leaves room for action. This is why constructive self-talk can be useful. Not because words magically change circumstances, but because clearer language can help you think more accurately and respond more effectively. Another important lesson is repetition. If you want to develop a healthier mental pattern, you cannot expect one positive thought to erase years of negative thinking. Change often requires repeated practice. Notice the old pattern. Pause. Question it. Choose a more realistic interpretation. Take a useful action. Then repeat. Over time, the new response can become more familiar. This process can be applied to many areas of life. If you want to become more organized, practice organizing one small area at a time. If you want to improve communication, practice listening before responding. If you want to become better with money, review your spending and make deliberate choices. If you want to improve your studies, create a consistent learning routine. The principle remains the same. Thinking can guide behavior, but behavior creates the evidence of change. Another important idea is responsibility. It is easy to blame every difficulty on circumstances, other people, or bad luck. Sometimes circumstances genuinely are outside your control. But even then, you can often control part of your response. You may not control what happens. You can often control how you prepare, what you learn, and what you do next. This does not mean blaming yourself for every problem. It means recognizing the areas where you have influence. That distinction can be empowering. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" ask, "What is within my control right now?" The answer may be small. But small areas of control can lead to meaningful action. Ultimately, the practical lesson of this section is that your beliefs deserve examination. Do not automatically accept every thought as truth. Do not treat every fear as a prediction. Do not let one mistake become an identity. And do not rely on positive thinking without practical action. Instead, build a healthier pattern. Notice your thoughts. Question your assumptions. Use realistic and constructive language. Take responsible action. Learn from the results. Then repeat. The goal is not to create a perfect mind. The goal is to develop a mind that can recognize unhelpful patterns and respond to life with greater clarity. And once you understand how beliefs can influence your reactions, another question becomes even more interesting. What happens when these mental patterns begin shaping the goals you choose and the future you imagine for yourself? Section 4. What kind of future are you building through the thoughts, choices, and habits you repeat every day? That question brings us to one of the most important ideas in this journey. Your mind can influence the direction of your actions, but your actions are what gradually shape your life. A goal begins as an idea. But an idea becomes meaningful only when it is connected to a realistic plan and consistent action. Imagine someone who wants to become healthier. They can imagine the result every day. They can tell themselves that they are capable. They can visualize success. But without appropriate habits and responsible action, the goal remains an idea. The same principle applies to education, work, finances, relationships, and personal growth. Your thoughts can influence your attitude toward a goal. But progress requires action. This is where the concept of visualization needs to be understood carefully. The original book gives visualization a powerful role and sometimes connects it with claims that are not scientifically established. A more practical approach is to use visualization as a planning tool. Imagine the result you want. Then imagine the steps required to reach it. What would you need to learn? What habits would you need to develop? What obstacles could appear? What would you do when motivation disappears? This type of mental preparation can make a goal more concrete. Instead of simply imagining success, you begin imagining the process. And the process is where real change happens. Another important principle is goal setting. A vague goal can be difficult to act on. I want to improve my life is a meaningful desire, but it does not tell you what to do tomorrow. A clearer goal might be: I will study this subject for a specific amount of time each day. Or, I will review my spending every week. Or, I will practice a useful skill consistently. Specific actions make progress easier to recognize. But goals should also be realistic. If a goal is so large that you cannot see the first step, it can create frustration. Break it into smaller actions. A large change can begin with a small routine. This brings us back to repetition. Your future is influenced not only by what you want, but by what you repeatedly do. One productive day is helpful. A productive routine is more powerful. One healthy decision is valuable. Repeated healthy decisions create a habit. One thoughtful financial choice is useful. Consistent financial discipline can create a stronger foundation. This is why consistency often matters more than temporary motivation. Motivation can change from one day to another. A routine can continue even when motivation is low. Another important lesson is dealing with negative thoughts. You do not need to eliminate every negative thought. Negative thoughts are part of normal human experience. The goal is to recognize them without automatically obeying them. Suppose you think, I am going to fail. Instead of arguing with yourself endlessly, ask, what evidence do I have? What can I prepare for? What is the next useful action? This moves the mind from prediction to problem solving. Another important principle is learning from the past without becoming trapped by it. Past experiences can teach you valuable lessons. A mistake can reveal a weakness in your approach. A difficult experience can teach you what to avoid. A successful experience can show you what worked. But the past should not become a permanent definition of your identity. You are capable of learning. And learning means your future behavior does not have to perfectly repeat your past behavior. This is where self-awareness becomes important. Pay attention to the patterns that repeatedly produce the same results. If you repeatedly procrastinate, examine why. If you repeatedly lose confidence when facing challenges, identify what triggers it. If you repeatedly make impulsive decisions, look at what happens immediately before those decisions. Understanding the pattern gives you an opportunity to change it. Another important lesson is responsibility for your response. You cannot control every event. You cannot control every person. You cannot guarantee every outcome. But you can often control your preparation, your effort, your choices, and your response. That is where your influence begins. This does not mean blaming yourself for circumstances outside your control. It means focusing your energy on what you can actually change. Instead of asking, why can't everything go my way? Ask, what can I responsibly do from here? That question can create movement. Another important idea is patience. Mental and behavioral change rarely happens instantly. If you have repeated a certain pattern for years, it may take time to develop a different response. Do not expect one positive statement to transform everything. Practice. Observe. Adjust. Continue. Small improvements can become meaningful when they are repeated. And this leads to perhaps the most practical conclusion of the entire summary. Your mind is not a magic machine that can guarantee wealth, success, health, or any specific outcome simply because you imagine it. Reality still matters. Circumstances matter. Knowledge matters. Skills matter. Effort matters. Other people matter. And sometimes circumstances remain difficult despite your best efforts. But your mental patterns can influence how you approach those circumstances. Your thoughts can influence your attention. Your beliefs can influence your expectations. Your expectations can influence your decisions. Your decisions can influence your behavior. And your repeated behavior can influence the direction of your life. That is a practical chain worth remembering. So what should you take away from the power of your subconscious mind? First, become aware of your thoughts. Notice what you repeatedly tell yourself. Second, question your assumptions. Not every thought is a fact. Third, replace unrealistic or destructive thinking with more accurate and constructive thinking. Fourth, connect your mindset with action. Do not simply imagine improvement. Take a practical step. Fifth, repeat the process. Because lasting change is rarely created by one dramatic moment. It is created by many small decisions repeated over time. And finally, remain grounded in reality. Think positively, but do not ignore problems. Believe in your ability to improve, but continue learning. Set goals, but accept that results require effort and circumstances may change. Use your imagination to plan, not to escape reality. And use your mind as a tool for better decisions rather than expecting it to control the world around you. Perhaps the most valuable question to carry forward is not, what can my mind magically make happen? Instead, ask, how can I use my thoughts, beliefs, attention, and choices to become a wiser and more responsible person? That question leads to real growth. Because your future is not created by thoughts alone. It is shaped by the relationship between what you think, what you choose, and what you repeatedly do. So observe your mind. Question your assumptions. Choose your thoughts carefully. Take responsible action. Learn from your mistakes. And keep moving forward. The mind can point toward a direction. But your actions are what take you there. Thank you for joining this journey through the power of your subconscious mind. And remember, a better life does not begin with believing that everything will magically change. It begins with becoming aware enough to change what you can, and disciplined enough to keep going.